Let me jump to Texas real quick before I get in there, because a lot of the debate is this even good for Texas and Oklahoma? The answer is yes, especially for Texas. Let me explain why. So, Texas is one of the biggest brands in college football, right? Probably outside of Alabama, even though they haven't been that good in over a decade now. Texas is the University of Texas, guys. No one's got more money than them. They are one of the biggest brands in college football, top 5 brand. They just are, right? And they've been struggling for the last 10 years. So, first of all, just look at it that way. I heard a good quote by someone that was basically like, well, if they're struggling in the Big 12, they might as well go struggle in the SEC, right? It can't get any worse, and at least now you're in the SEC. I don't think they're going to struggle, maybe in the short term, but this gives Texas a huge recruiting advantage. Guys, why have schools like Alabama, like Georgia, like LSU, like Clemson, why have they been able to go in and get players out of Texas? It's because they get to come in and say, we're in the SEC. If you grew up in Texas, you want to go play at UT. You want to go play for the Texas Longhorns, right? 90% of the football players in Texas want to go play at the University of Texas. They want to stay home. But there's these SEC schools, right? Or maybe even Clemson, because if I go to a program they are, and Ohio State, that come in and draw them out. Because Texas isn't as good as they've been, and these coaches get to come to their living rooms and say, hey, you want to go to the NFL? You got to come to the SEC. This is what we can do, right? Nick Saban sits in the living room of these 17, 18-year-old kids, and he's like, come on, man, you know you want to come play SEC ball with the big boys. We're Alabama. We win championships. I send everyone to the NFL. And basically, these kids go, yeah, you're right. Well, guess what? Now that Texas is in the SEC, that's not going to be the case. We already saw this with Texas A&M, right? Texas A&M was never really in contention to win the Big 12, right? And like Texas A&M was good like in the 90s, right? Like they had some good 90s teams. Like they would always go to the Cotton Bowl and play Notre Dame, right? I think they did like 4 years in a row, like 91, 92, 93, and 94, something like that. They had like an upset Big 12 championship, I think, in like 98. I want to say they beat Kansas State, right? But for the most part, they're an 8-4 football program. That's even in the SEC, they've still kind of remained that. But like that's what they were, right? In the Big 12, they're not even the biggest brand in their own state, let alone a big national brand, right? They're Texas A&M. Well, when they went to the SEC, they were better because now they could take recruits from Texas finally, right? Finally, Texas A&M had a slight recruiting edge on Texas. Because they could tell kids, you get to stay home, but instead of going to Texas, you come play for us, and you'll play in the SEC. It's a win-win. So Texas has no choice but to go do this because they're not even the best brand in their own state anymore, right? But if I'm Texas A&M, or if I'm a handful of SEC schools, I'm actually not thrilled about Texas coming in for this exact reason. If I'm Alabama, if I'm Georgia, if I'm LSU, if I'm Texas A&M, I've enjoyed being able to go into Texas and steal recruits from the University of Texas and Oklahoma for that matter. Oklahoma recruits a lot of players from Texas. They're very close. Well, Oklahoma and Texas come into the SEC and those recruits are like, oh, cool, I get to stay home and play for Texas now and play in the SEC. So that would make me nervous if I'm LSU, right? If Alabama will probably be fine and be Alabama as long as Nick Saban's there. But, I mean, crap, if I'm Texas A&M, I'm the most upset about this decision. I feel like they're the one SEC school that should have voted no. Like, no, we don't want them in here. Because now you're not going to have that leg up in your state that you've been enjoying ever since coming to the SEC. And I think the same goes for Oklahoma, right? Now, for Oklahoma, it doesn't make a lot of sense from the standpoint that they've already been winning 11, 12 games a year, making the college football playoff, right? Which they've made like 4 times now. Yes, they've lost every time in the first round, but they're getting better, right? They're on the cusp of winning a national championship every year. They're already doing that in the Big 12. They're going to come in the SEC, and while I think they'll still be great, you do make your path a little harder considering you already had that. But I think even with Oklahoma, it's a recruiting advantage, right? Because Oklahoma's lacked the defense. to go with their amazing offenses that they've had. Oh, the Oklahoma offenses, right, under Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, then Jalen Hurts, and now Spencer Rattler, like these offenses have been incredible. Bob Stoops and then handing the torch to Lincoln Riley and what he's done, like it's insane. But their defenses have been so bad. I mean, it's literally cost them probably 3 national championships. If they just would have had mediocre defenses in some of those years, right? 2016, 2017, 18, they probably win the national championship. Well, being in the SEC is going to allow them to recruit those defensive players. And they've already been getting there. I think we're about to see the best Oklahoma defense we've seen in the last 7 years probably coming up in 2021. But going forward, they're going to get those recruits, right? Because it's the one thing Oklahoma was missing as a program, right? Recruits could say, well, I want to go here, but you're not in the SEC. That's over now. Oklahoma's going to be in the SEC. So I think for Oklahoma and Texas, it makes a lot of sense, even from a competitive standpoint. Obviously, it made financial sense 1,000%. But I think it also makes sense on the field for your football product. I think both these teams will be better because of this, especially Texas. I mean, Texas can't really get much worse. They still recruit really well, despite not being in the SEC, despite not being good the last 10 years. They always have like top 10 recruiting classes. So they get the right coach that actually develops their talent. They're going to be good. And with Steve Sarkisian coming in this year, maybe he's the guy that finally gets them to where they should be. I will admit, it would be kind of enjoyable as a college football fan to see Texas, the brand, be back and being good again. And now they're going to be doing that in the SEC come 2025, or maybe before that.